radio in a can.
Night.
Thursday night. It's a
Arshavir
Thursday night show.
Blackwell, welcome.
All right.
And first
You're
of all, did I
ready.
say that right, by
Okay.
the way? I want to
So-
make, Arshavir.
You did. You actually, I'm impressed.
Where can
'cause
I
a lot of
ask
people
is
get it
that from?
very
Family
wrong.
name? Okay.
That's
Got
my
it.
grandfather's name.
Armenian.
wow.
It's Armenian, and it's like even Armenian
Oh, really?
people have trouble with it. So yeah, they're all named like
Oh, okay,
Aram
gotcha.
or Armin or something. You know, it's like you
Do I
say
have to
that,
call
and
you?
they're
Yeah,
like,
I
"Do
was
have
going to
to call
actually
you
ask,
that?"
is
So
there like a nickname of Arshavir?
Is there a nickname?
that is
Arshavir is the nickname?
Yeah. So
I'm like, holy shit,
that is
really?
the
Like,
short
what?
version of it.
yeah, exactly. Can you imagine? No, there's like I let my sisters
Arsh.
call
Yeah,
me
okay.
Arsh
Got it.
and my mom, but beyond it's
Oh,
like
I
a
gotcha.
special
Yeah,
status
no,
word.
listen.
So
I
you know,
maybe one day we could escalate.
maybe one day.
Maybe one day we can all
We'll
be at that
escalate to
level,
the Arsh
you know.
level. Yeah, gotcha. It
all starts with the
step,
first
right? Yeah.
conversation, right?
Exactly.
So, hey, man, thanks for coming on.
Exactly.
And Thursday night shows are a lot of fun for Tom and I.
Yeah.
We kind of, everyone's almost done with the week. We
Tend to be a little
have
looser
bit
on
more
Thursday nights.
bandwidth,
Okay.
to kind of explore shit because we're all like, all right, it was a weird week. Let's let it go. So I'm excited to have you, man. It's a topic near and dear to my heart. So
Thank you.
Yeah, Tom's
Good.
laughing. We have Matt and Tom guests. They're different, and you decidedly fall into the Matt guest category,
You skew towards a Matt
which
guest.
is exciting for me, of course.
Got it.
But I actually,
Yeah, I think both
Yeah, I was gonna
sides.
say
We both
those
learn a
exact
lot. We
things,
both have a
yeah,
good
so.
conversation. So,
so
yeah.
Arshavir, tell me. Let's talk about you a little bit, man. You before we get into the good stuff, you don't just land there. How do you come to be where you is?
So I was the kid that watched Star Trek with all of his friends and, wanted to have a computer when he was 10 years old and thought all that stuff was really super cool. So when I went to college and then grad school, that's kind of what I naturally gravitated into. And I basically fell into a field called cognitive science. Really just because that's like the courses I was taking, and I was like, okay, so then I guess this is what
Spoken
I'm
like
gonna
a
do.
true college
So
man.
it's not.
Well, this is what I
Yeah,
have the most
yeah.
credits in.
So-
Well, I'm here now.
Well, I was lucky because I went to a school that didn't
Okay.
have requirements, so you could just
Oh.
take whatever the hell you wanted to.
Yeah.
And so,
Was it Brown?
yeah, it was Brown. It was Brown.
That's
Yeah.
the only one I know that isn't
Yeah.
like,
Yeah,
what
yeah.
do you want a degree in? We'll give it to you.
Yeah. I actually had a friend who
Oh, of
created
course.
her own major, and her major was existentialism.
I mean, there's like a million
Which
jokes
I
right
was
at
like,
the surface
how
there.
are
I
you
just
gonna
can't-
get a job in that?
Yeah. So,
And
Yeah, how do you
they
even- what's the
test her
rubric for that?
Like
Tell
what,
me.
like, exactly. Not even just philosophy or something like that.
I mean, there's
but,
literally
like,
not a wrong
existentialism.
answer. What the fuck?
And her-
I mean, she's a genius.
I
I guess.
Or they're all wrong
either that
answers,
or they're all wrong answers.
Right.
that definitely.
She's a fucking
do you need
genius.
to go to
really.
class?
I-
Like for existentialism, I'm thinking no. You just have to sit around and go
Truthfully,
like,
her
yeah,
designing
this
that major probably means she deserves the fucking degree, right? Like it's like, all right, you win, you take it.
I think so. I just don't know
Sure.
what she went on to do. I mean, what are you
Right.
going to do? Go into industry?
There's-
I mean,
Well, if you could track her down, she might make a great guest too.
Yeah.
she actually might. But what's funny is that, this is true. Her father was a strict
Okay.
Freudian psychoanalyst. So
Wow.
I think that, and he named her Anna, which was Freud's kid's name, Anna. So I think
Sounds
that,
like she's got daddy issues.
maybe that.
Yeah, there might be some generational trauma
Oh,
there.
man.
Yes, exactly. That
Yeah.
that upbringing definitely affected, where she was coming from. So, but anyway, so she majored in existentialism. I did not. I majored in cognitive science. And what cognitive science is, it's basically kind of like a soup or a stew of cognitive psychology, computer science, neuroscience, anthropology. So it's basically like all the studies of like how humans think and think not just individually, but also in groups.
I feel like
so
I have to
sociology
quit
is also
my
actually
job and
included.
go do that right now. Like or take night classes. I love everything
It's
you
very
just said. I'm like,
interesting.
fuck, that sounds fascinating.
Yeah, it's very cool. I was very fortunate. I think that where I went was actually one of the first cognitive science programs in the country. And so they just, kind of cobbled together a lot of different departments that they already had and turn those into the cognitive
Anything
science
to
department.
invent a new product. I love
And
their
so,
I love their spirit.
yeah, right, exactly. They also
Oh,
had a semiotics department, which was completely like that's where all the people
sure.
that smoke French
Yeah.
cigarettes basically. I mean, it was like they went that major. I had friends in, and they all basically just sat around
That's
watching
about
like
what I
film
would have thought.
noir
Yeah.
all day and writing short papers about it. So, which is a fun way to spend college.
4 years, yeah.
4 years of college, smoking cigarettes and watching film noir. So, but that was really at the very, very beginning of when what they now call large language models or transformers or whatever, deep learning. Back then it was just called neural networks. And I was very fortunate because that was one of the few colleges where they actually had people who were doing work in neural networks. And that was like in the late 80s. So it was really, really new then and very, very, kind of very much on the edge, like it was kind of spooky and almost like witchcraft.
So lots changed in that time.
Are the people doing
no,
a lot?
Everyone uses those same words to describe it now.
Yeah, no, exactly. So, I mean, at the time, we took it seriously, but there were a lot of people that thought of it as being just a lot of hand wavy magic and not how real artificial intelligence at that time was all symbols. So it was like, basically fancy computer programs that you would write and you would have all these symbols and they would, do stuff and it would tell it to put the pink block on the orange, table or whatever, which was an example of one of the, kind of very, very early AI systems. And then I was very lucky. I went to UC San Diego, which also was one of the earliest cognitive science departments. And I did my graduate work there in cognitive science, in their cognitive science department. And I got to work with the two really, really fantastic professors, Jeff Elman and Elizabeth Bates. And they were doing stuff that like is amazingly close to what LLMs are like now in the 90s. So they were just like super ahead of their time. And they were also seen by a lot of people like, Noam Chomsky, the big figure in linguistics, definitely felt that they were really just way far out there and not to be taken seriously at all. And I remember actually Liz Bates used to tell this story of how there was a reporter from Newsweek talking to Noam Chomsky and saying, just so I get the whole everybody's view on this, what would someone who didn't agree in your theories of language say, or who would those people be? And he said, no, there's no serious person out there that wouldn't agree with my theory of language, because he was kind of arrogant. And he said, and she pushed him and she said, well, I don't know, maybe Jeff Elman. So I mean, these people were really seen as like the opposite of kind of like the status quo language philosophy belief system at the time. And so he actually developed a lot of the very, very early versions. I mean, we didn't have the algorithms we have now. We didn't have the computer power we had now. We couldn't like run $1 billion set of, thousands of servers running GPUs and things like that. So it was obviously very, very scaled down problems. But what Jeff did was basically, the whole way that transformers work, and this is why they're so weird and kind of incredible, is everything you get out of that transformer, all of that stuff that seems like you're actually talking to a human being or some facsimile of a human being, all of that comes from it being trained to predict the next word. That's all it's doing. So it's like super powered, over glorified
Yeah.
autocomplete.
I like the way you describe
And
that.
the
Actually,
person
that's
that
cute.
invented that idea was, the person that invented that was Jeff Elman. And he was one of the first people to actually do this with models where I remember he said to me, yeah, the reason I did that is because it's really easy to get training data because you just wait a second and you have the next word. And with these models, the problem has always been, well, how do I train them? Because they need tons and tons and tons and tons of data in order to get them to do anything interesting or useful. And so he figured, well, this was kind of like a little hack that he could do. And with the models that they had at the time, he really did some pretty important and interesting work. And it's so fascinating to me now to see what's going on and to see how the way that these systems work is so close to the way that they thought language worked back then that so many of the mainstream people in language thought was just crazy.
And what was the big rate limiter back then, though? Because I mean, it's my understanding. Yeah, I mean, because
was it the speed?
I've come to. I mean, I work in the later version of this, right? Not the formative version like you did, but it's my understanding of this is like they're not still 100% sure how it is doing what it's doing outside of saying like we finally threw enough horsepower at these things that they started doing that. Was that really the only difference between then and now? I mean, it sounds like structurally it's very similar.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, Jeff spent a lot of time doing exactly that kind of work. He didn't call it this, but this is what we would call today mechanistic interpretability, right? So trying to figure that's the technical term for it. So trying to figure out how it is that these extremely complicated systems are doing any of what they're doing. He did some of that himself. His systems were, compared to what we have now, toy systems. So he was able to, there was one paper where he showed sort of how it was able to parse a particular very simple sentence. And you could actually see it sort of move through state space. So that's kind of like at the level that most of the interpretability work today is being done. So when you see people trying to figure out how these systems are working, they're not working with these huge frontier models that have like literally billions of parameters and that get, trillions of tokens a day on OpenAI's, on ChatGPT or on Claude or whatnot. They're working with much smaller models. They're models that are much bigger than what Jeff was working with. But they are still much more tractable and easy to understand. And of course, the other thing you have to remember is that those big frontier models are like behind walls, right? So, the only people that can do any research on them, even if they were able to, because of this, despite the size, the only people are the people actually working at, say, OpenAI, who have access to those models,
behind
or Claude,
behind
or
the wall.
Google or something like that. Behind the wall. Whereas if you want to work with some of the smaller models that are local that you can just download and have on your own machine, obviously anybody.
Yeah, it's funny though, because you mentioned that they were like toy models, and just for comparison, I downloaded Minstrel, and it's a local model, Tom, that you could download and you can put it on your phone, you can put it on your laptop. And I ran it and I'm like, what a steaming pile of dog shit this thing is, because you're used to like Gemini and OpenAI and Claude, and you're like, fuck, these things are running circles around this. It's not, it's like using a sharpened stick that you burned with fire as a pencil. It's like really, really rudimentary.
Well, yeah, those are really more designed for, I think, much narrower use cases, and they're not going to be as powerful as a frontier model, obviously, because that thing is huge. There was kind of this rubric in AI that is still true, which is that AI does really well in very, very narrowly defined, super precise, like lasers being used in fusion, like that is a topic of interest. So one of the things that's interesting about these frontier models is that they're pretty much good at a huge variety of things, from, answering questions about health to travel. I mean, all sorts of different things, but they're huge, and they took literally,
Sure.
millions or billions of dollars to train. The smaller models, I think, because they do have some advantages. If you're not trying to use it for something super fancy like a frontier model, they do have a lot of utility. I've used them for,
like, what's a good use case
smaller
for
scale
something
projects.
like that? Like, what do you got in your mind? Like,
Well, yeah. So let's say you were, this is a real example. So let's say
Okay.
you were writing ad copy and you want to do it all locally. And what you could do is actually fine tune it on your own personal brand, so it doesn't just sound like all of the other AI generated content that comes out there. And that's actually a very legit use case for it, because you have, let's say, 500 or 1,000 small snippets of stuff that you've already done, and you just do a sort of a post-training, pre-training. So these are models that have already been trained that you're downloading, but there's a fine-tuning step
that you have
after
to
that
apply
training
after.
that you can apply.
And that's the part I think I gave up on.
Yeah,
like, this is not interesting to me.
Yeah. The other advantage of that is you're not sending stuff over the wire to some
which is all which I was going to get into when we got
it.
into the health side of this. That's where this falls apart. For sure. Yeah.
Right, exactly. The problem is that if you're working for, a creative agency, or you're working for a financial institution, or for using health data or anything like that, you're going to have huge confidentiality
which
issues.
Gets interesting, but outrageously expensive immediately, right? Like, so, we're working with a client right now that has stood up their own private Azure instance. And inside of that, because OpenAI's got to deal with Microsoft, like, you could stand up a local model of OpenAI inside your Azure instance. And now it's completely yours. Nobody knows anything. And that's the right way to do it. But your minimum operating just to keep the lights on there before you've done anything is 75, 80 grand a year.
Yeah.
In like that's that's just literally to keep the lights on. Like, that's not putting furniture in the house or cleaning the windows or, it's basically no, you can sit in here for, 80 grand a year. And then on top of that, you got to actually build all the stuff. And so it's like, all right, so that's expensive, right? And not for everybody, obviously.
Right.
But talk to me about the specialization thing, because that's where I agree with you like a lot on this one. I love the idea that a model could be superhuman good at like 3 things, right? Like, or it could be pretty good at or at a million things. And I think it's a fascinating idea, because my brain starts going to like, well, the answer from not just a GPU standpoint, because eventually we're going to run out of land to put data centers. Like, we're going to have to invent a new paradigm, right? Like, somebody told me they ran the math. Yeah, I know. We've already started talking about that, but like, even space has got limitations, right? There's a lot of radiation. The gamma radiation in space fucks up every GPU, right? And that's I had this whole crazy conversation. You just can't just roll down the window, get cooling. Yeah, you got to like protect it. So anyway, my point is, somebody did a math formula, and they said to mine Bitcoin through its completion in 2140, I think is when it ends. Just to mine Bitcoin, nothing else, no AI, no nothing else. There is not enough dirt on planet Earth to actually build enough data centers, to build enough electric generation to actually get to that endpoint. Doesn't exist. So if that's true, and I fucking way above my pay grade to fact check that, but the person who gave it to me was a mathematician. So I'm taking a little bit on blind faith here, but let's just say that's true for this conversation. These models, if you talk about like being really good at everything, dude, the fucking GPU, the compute power to keep that kind of intelligence moving is insane. When you could have these little models that are really fucking good, but only at this one thing, and just have a million of those that turn on and off as you need them.
Well, yeah, and it depends on what your use case is, right? Like, if you're really interested only in having one good thing, and that's more than satisfactory for you, then it works fine. I mean, the thing is I have a couple thoughts about that. The first is that very typically a lot of these analyses of like running out of X, Y, or Z end up not taking into account all sorts of great innovation.
Listen, I didn't say it wasn't a flawed comment.
Like,
I trust me. I got it.
Yeah. No. Right. So, I mean, like,
at its current understanding, at our current limitations.
Right. I mean, for example, DeepSeek just came out, I think, a few weeks ago, or maybe even sooner than that, like last week, with a new model that is like, I think uses 10% of the compute, because it doesn't have, so all of those attention heads that your normal transformer uses, it actually is able to prune those during training very rapidly. So it's actually only using a subset of the ones that are actually driving the. And
then we got a mixed bag on DeepSeek, though. They say this cool shit, then we find out half of it's a lie. But even if you account for the lie, they're still better. Yeah. They're still ahead of the game. So like, you take it with a grain of salt, kind of thing.
Well, I take it with a grain of salt, but I think the main thing is they're doing a lot of stuff open source that, which ChatGPT and all those other Western companies are not doing. And I think that's going to be, because, you can, if you're doing open source, you can always verify these claims. So that's kind of what I feel is that, are they lying? I don't know. I'm sure some, if they're lying,
I don't give a shit if they are lying. Because even when we find out, because they said it's like 2,500 GPUs, we find out it's more like 20,000. But here's the thing: OpenAI at the time was like 60,000, right? Like, so it's like, okay, so they lied. Exactly. Who gives a shit? They're still better. Like, in the end of the day, they're still doing it better. And you know what? Yeah. I've been an open source programmer for 30 years, and let me tell you, you can close source that shit real fast if you had to, right? So like, you can do both ways. And what was interesting, that's what got me to use Perplexity originally, was they were the only people out there that actually installed a local instance of DeepSeek and then cut it off from China, because they stamped it on their internal servers. And I was like, see, now that's interesting, because that's what open source should be. You should be able to do that. And I really applauded them for doing that. And it was interesting. And it was fucking awesome. I don't know if you remember, but at the time, I went back and forth because you could do the pull down in Perplexity, and the difference was night and day. I'm like, oh my God, this is great.
Yeah. I mean, that's a very good example, I think, of exactly why what China is doing is so important. There was a long time ago, this reminds me kind of this, there was a science fiction story where everyone, it was like the whole world had robots, but they were all humanoid robots. And all of them started to break down and go crazy. And the guy basically came up with a new kind of robot that was like, didn't look humanoid at all, but was totally devoted to whatever function it was supposed to be doing. So if it was like an air traffic controller, it would just have like a mouth and an arm, and everyone was like kind of freaked out by it, but it worked great. And I think that with what you're talking about is kind of what we may see.
Well, it depends on how efficient people want to get, right? I remember back in the day, you wanted to watch every line of code. And when we used to tinker with Photoshop in the computer lab in school, we used a program called ResEdit, where you go into the binary and change like the credits. Yeah. Oh, yeah, right. So we would change the credits in Photoshop to be like, see more butts and, all this crazy shit. And we thought it was hilarious. And then so original lines of code, you'd see these much smaller models, and then all of a sudden, when RAM was cheap and hard drives got cheaper, all of a sudden they weren't pruning code, they weren't like being efficient. Now Photoshop's a bloated dumpster fire of code, like trillions of lines of code, because like they don't care. And I feel like that's where these frontier models are going, right? Like they're like, we don't really have to care, because we'll just throw more GPUs at this, and they like doesn't fucking matter. Like, and there's no reason to be better, right?
Right. It's kind of like the old phone company. Like, you're stuck with us, so we can charge you
DeepSeek is, I guess, one reason to do that. Because those models will eventually eat their lunch. Yeah, exactly.
Like the MCI.
Sprint PCS is here comes Sprint. But like, the narrowness of this, like, I know when we hear the news a lot, and I know this is like, it's fun clickbait out there, but when we hear the news about like, Armageddon, a la, Skynet, AI taking over the world, I think a lot of people kind of don't really understand what what those fears are based off of. But like when I look at that stuff, I look at it the exact opposite way. I said, you know what? If I had cancer, let's say I had lung cancer, right? I would want a thing that knows at an atomic level every fucking thing there is to know about lung cancer. I don't give a shit about bone cancer, brain cancer, pancreatic cancer. I literally don't have any care in the world. I only want to know about this. And I don't think you could train that on a frontier model efficiently. Or you could if you just kept stuffing shit into a jar and just keep making the jar bigger. But I don't know. I'm intrigued by this idea of like niching down and being like hyper focused on something, protein synthesis, like, you know, pick any random thing and be like, okay, how do we just dig a fucking 1,000,000-mile deep hole on this one little top?
Right. Well, I think in the end, that's really an empirical question. I think it's a very good question that I would love to see people working on, because I don't think anybody is that I know of. But to see what the limits are with frontier models compared to just a local, you know, smaller LLM that's been fine-tuned and trained. So if you had something like a chat GPT and compared it on something really very, very, you know, narrow, like what you're talking about, like lung cancer, and then you fine-tuned a small model with the same kind of information, I would love to see some kind of measure of whether it's just as good or maybe.
But these tests
better,
that they run are always like the same stupid thing: haystack test or needle in a haystack test, and all the you know, all these random tests that are like great for like bench people, like looking at, you know.
Yeah, I think part of the problem with the tests is that they become part of the sort of training set very quickly. And so once they're what you see with I think part of the reason why a lot of these benchmarks are doing so well now, or why models are doing so well on the benchmarks, is that the benchmarks get leaked out, and then that, you know,
and then the model knows the benchmarks. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
It has the answers to the test before it takes the test.
Yeah, exactly. And I think funny. That's, you know, that's something I don't know how to manage.
Well, there's not a right answer for any, or there's not a good answer, I don't think, for any of these things, but it's, a buddy of Tom and I's actually is on a AI ethics board, like, and, you know, yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. Really? John Sherman, he's a local guy who started a podcast. He's going to kill me right now for not remembering the fucking name of this thing. Yeah, he started a podcast on this, and like he and I used to spar over this because he was really a big proponent and still is for humanity. That's what it was, for humanity. And his whole like thing isn't totally wrong. He's saying like the fate of 8 billion people is being left to about 2,000 people that run AI on the planet right now. And he's not completely bananas in that regard. Like, I don't know about the numbers, don't really care. At the end of the day, I don't think he's wrong that there's a small number of people looking to capitalize on the AI gold rush. And there's a lot of people that in the absolute worst case scenario are fucked. And I get that that's a scary concept. Now, I don't personally, where John and I part ways, is that he dives in on saying this is an inevitability. And I'm like, it is one of many options. Like, and that's our difference of opinion here. Right. Because here's the thing, and this might be a great on-ramp to the health side of this, right? Like, let's look at environmental first real quick though. In the last year, I've talked to no less than 3 dozen companies that have planet-wide initiatives heavily influenced and guided by AI, all around things from cleaning up the ocean's plastics to scrubbing carbon from the environment to, you know, regenerative agriculture, you name it. And that's just the people that dumbass Matt Hampton in Baltimore, Maryland got a chance to talk to. Imagine how many there are on the planet right now. My guess is orders and orders and orders of magnitude over that. None of those people are looking to fuck humanity. In fact, all of them are almost exclusively trying to do the opposite. You know what I mean?
Going the other way.
So in my mind, accepting the fact that AI could also cure climate crisis. It could cure a lot of the bigger diseases we struggle with, and clean up our air and water and make our food better. There's just as likely a chance of that as Skynet. Like, like it does.
Oh, I think there's much more likely.
I mean, yes, I think Skynet. That if you look at Skynet, that's one, and I think there's a bunch of other ways this can go. Another way this could go is this whole AI bubble burst. AI loses a lot of steam. 2026 dials it back, and
people are calling for that
that's why
now
I brought
too.
it up. Is like if the rug gets pulled out from this and the funding dries up, which I don't think that's going to necessarily happen in 26, but like it could happen, and it could slow down enough to spook the day traders, right? And when that happens, then this is like it takes a little bit of the shine off of this thing, and now all of a sudden, we have a really fancy Grammarly. Like I don't know, like again, these are all there's a theater of options in this world. I happen to think we end up on the better side of it, but that's just my perhaps naivete.
Right. I think that the net effect of it is going to be very positive. The problem is any new really transformative technology has always had people, they were saying the same thing when computers became prevalent. Oh, all these people who sit all day in front of an adding machine, grinding out numbers, what are they going to do now? Because computers are doing all that. You had, probably there were people complaining about the printing press causing all sorts.
The monks are like, who's going to write the Bible out now?
Who's going to ride all the horses once we get these cars?
Exactly. Who's going to ride the horse? What are you going to do with all the horses? And, oh my God, now everybody's going to be able to afford books, which is like horrible because that's the only way we had control was being the only people that were literate and had, access to this stuff. So I think that the 2,000 people controlling the world is a kind of an interesting notion. I don't think it's 2,000, but I think that it is unfortunate that I think that's part of a wider trend, and we're definitely seeing it in this country, of a bifurcation. And I mean, there's already huge. There's the income inequality has already been huge in this country, and it's only getting worse. And I've been to countries with much better, much more even levels of income inequality, and they're very pleasant. It's much nicer to be in a place where it's like, there's not a lot of billionaires wandering around, but you don't have a huge amount of poverty that you have to, somehow navigate as well. And so I think that the trend that he's talking about, maybe just part of a more general trend that seems to be like even now, I feel like all this talk about the economy being good, I really think it's good
of course,
for a restricted
set of a handful of people.
And then it's like, well, I mean, I live in LA and I drive around downtown LA and I'm like, well, I don't see how the economy could be doing well if there's this many people living in tents.
Yeah.
We're not talking one or two. We're talking like it's a whole blocks of people living in these
I haven't been to LA in 20 years. So.
Yeah. Oh, you go to any of the off ramps. I mean, it's really very disturbing. It's worse in San Francisco. And, this is going on in a lot of American cities. And it's like, well, the stock market is great, but, that's not having any sort of positive impact on those people. They don't have any stocks. So
none of
that is
helping my
down
tent
to them.
situation. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I think that as far as, whether it's good or bad, I think that, a lot of people, so for example, let's look at the internet. The internet was very, very big. And then there was that whole .com crash. But now, I mean, look at how much of the economy really depends upon the internet.
Like
and the
all
fact
of it.
that there was that crash 20 or so years ago.
Like
all of it, right. And I remember when the .com crash happened, everyone was like, well, I guess we're all going to go back to, using our typewriters or something.
Yeah.
And yet that's not,
I was making a website for Ameritrade when that
And
happened, just to give you a frame of reference. They were like, yeah, we're not going back to calculators.
Really?
Keep making my website, buddy. I was like, yep, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But there was a huge cratering, right? I mean, like, Ask Jeeves went from like $200 a share to like $1 a share or something like that.
Best fucking search engine ever.
I know that because I worked there.
I'm planting a flag on that one. That was the best search engine. Yeah, I loved it.
Ask Jeeves?
Did you really?
Well, I worked there.
Oh, that's fucking hilarious. That's
I
awesome.
I was one of their earlier employees. I worked there, and I was actually trying to get them to use some very simple neural network technology for what they were doing. And it was really very much a struggle because there were some people that were very enthusiastic about it and just thought it was great. And that, what I was working on was really cool. And then there were other people who tended to be older, who were very anti and like, oh, this is just bad. It's never going to work, but not in any kind of reasonable way. It's not like they had, it's not like they came up with like, it's not going to work because of this.
The former cohort, they all went to Google and made $1 billion for me. Yeah,
exactly. So that was my Ask Jeeves story. But anyway, I think that in the end, it's probably going to do some bad things. But all of the problems that you're talking about, I think, are almost certainly going to be solved or moved along.
Yeah, we'll invent a whole new suite
significantly.
Of problems.
Because how could it not be that way? I mean, you've got access to huge amounts of data by this very intelligent system. And we're really, I think, just at the beginning of sort of this huge ramp up of what these things are going to be seen to be able to do. I think it's just starting.
Amazing woman in AI today, and for the first time, and she had a great way of describing that. She goes, I have to constantly remind my clients that we are nothing but 4-year-olds in a sandbox learning to not eat poop. She's like, that's where we're at in the learning spectrum of where we're at. And I was like, I fucking love that you described it that way. Like, I just like everything about that I'm going to steal and reuse. And and that's that. Yeah, I love it.
That's true. Someone actually just the other day said this is like the worst that AI models will
look
ever
around.
be.
This is the shittiest.
So every day they're going to get better. This is the worst it gets, and I think that in 5 years or more, maybe less. I mean, there's technological innovations that when I was doing my cognitive science degree, the whole notion of being able to talk to a computer and getting it to understand what you were saying and respond to you. I'm not even talking about ChatGPT. I mean, even like something basic like Alexa, where Alexa, you add it, like what's the weather? I mean, nothing sophisticated, just, hey, turn the lights on or something like that. That was really just seen as being very science fictional at the time because it was.
I can imagine.
And
now I'm having arguments with her. That's not what I said.
Listen,
we don't actually get along very well.
I have to
told you
myself to not write ugh like when I'm on my 37th go around with a code problem, because like that's all I want to say is ugh, you fucked up again. And I'm like, yeah, I can't write that. It's not productive. It's just using tokens for no reason. Like, like this isn't going to get me anywhere. It won't even make me feel better. Like just keep moving. But I feel very clinical talking to my AI because I think I kind of am. I'm like, use very intentional language and stuff, but I find myself like wanting to talk to every human like that now, because when you're talking to AI and like a thing I learned early on was like, if you say like, I prefer red, and then it gives you blue or pink, or orange, you're like, oh, this thing's stupid. It fucked up. And it's like, well, no, you just said you prefer red. You didn't actually tell it to give you red. And then you can say, I want it to be red. And like, if you look at it through a different lens, you realize that, well, okay, as they say, people in hell want ice water, right? Like, but if you say it shall be red, it's a completely different ball of wax from an LLM standpoint, because it now says there's no variability here. It's going to be red because it shall be red, right? Like, and reconfiguring your thoughts to talk to these models like that takes time. It's a skill. Like, and I'm learning more and more every day on this, but it's been years and I still learn more every day, because you're like, okay, how could I have gotten a better reply out of this? Because it didn't get, the last 10 prompts were like this far off from what I wanted. Then you start thinking, I'm like, to your wife or something, I'm like, I shall have dinner at 8:00. It doesn't quite translate the same. It doesn't go well.
How does that go over?
But it just means I have to now be in constant thought, because during the day I got to think to talk more specifically, and at night I got to think to talk like a human being, right? And it's like, I'm like, oh my God. I dream for the days where you're like, Alexa, I need to make an app. Are you ready to start making this happen? And they're like, yep, let's do it. And then you can just talk. Like, that's what I think is going to be fun.
Yeah, I think that's going to happen sooner rather than later. I think you're going to find, the technology for that is going to progress pretty quickly. It is kind of like talking to someone 100%. On the spectrum.
That's a great way of putting it.
And, and I think that what I found, it actually has changed how I speak to people as well. And what it's changed is, I think I tend to be very minimalist when I'm talking to people and explaining things. And you can't really do that with ChatGPT. And so there's all sorts of stuff that normally I would kind of cut out and just be like, do this. And now I find that what I'll tell it is all sorts of sort of side little thoughts and pieces of information that may actually help it
for sure
in getting to the solution, even though they seem kind of trivial. And I found that if you say like, oh, I want this and this is what I'm doing with it, and here's what I've done so far. And if you give it sort of additional context, it tends to actually give you, in general, a much better result, I found. And I sort of noticed that I started doing that with people too. So instead of just saying, X or Y or Z or whatever, I'll be like, oh, this is what I was thinking of, and the reason for the thought was this. And I'll kind of give them a little bit of context. And I feel like, I don't know if that helps better with people.
Well, I think it depends on what you're doing. If you're ordering a cup of coffee, I'll take an Americano. Right. I don't need the whole. I was thinking I'd really like something with a little bit, more milk in it.
But I think that does help people too, because I'm the same way, man. I've been in tech, guys, forever, and most of the people I talk to during the day are also tech adjacent at a minimum, and I tend to shorthand a lot of stuff too. But people don't always want to raise their hand and be like, I don't understand what you just said. Could you please repeat it? And they'll go off and just do it. And I'm like, why didn't you just fucking ask me what the thing? Well, you seemed like you were in a hurry. I'm like, well, I'm always in a hurry. That's all. Yes. But if you didn't understand me. And so it's helped me sort of be like, hey, you know what? Let me slow down here a minute. Let me say this a little bit more rotund, like, so that you got a little bit more meat on this. But
no, exactly. I mean, I think that it's helpful in general, not for ordering coffee, but, to sort of give people a little bit more filler. And, people don't want to seem stupid, right? No one wants to be like that guy that's always asking, wait, I don't understand what you said. So I think there's probably a sociology thesis or a sociolinguistic thesis in there somewhere that, maybe someone's already writing on the effects of LLMs on human linguistic interactions.
I think somebody is feeding that prompt into chat right now.
They're prompting into chat,
But I think what you guys are saying, it sounds like you're talking more about how specific can I be versus verbose or terse, right? It's not how many words, it's how can I give you the most specific thing I can to get the outcome I want?
Yeah, it's specificity, but it's also, I think, context, which is a little different.
Okay.
It's kind of like, here's my question for you, and let me explain to you kind of what I've already done to help answer this question. And let me kind of explain to you why, and I've actually noticed that a lot of times LLMs will ask you, why are you asking me this question? Which is a little creepy, but they will say like, oh, are you asking me this just because you're kind of curious? Or is this because you're working on something that is, relevant?
They've gotten better at that, though. They weren't always like that. I remember in the early days of ChatGPT, it was basically like, we're just going to make up what we interpret is what your intention was. And it was sort of like throwing darts at a broadside of a barn. You're like, all right, maybe that's what I thought. I'm not sure. No, they have definitely improved.
They've improved, right? So that's just an example. And so I think if you give them that context beforehand, if you kind of anticipate some of the questions they're going to ask you in advance, you're going to be more likely to get a better result.
Yeah.
At least that's what I found.
And see, that's where I want to pick your brain on the health side of it, because this is something Tom and I have talked about a lot. And I think the example I always use, Tom and I are in Baltimore. Hopkins had the Henrietta Lacks situation where some random woman walks in off the street with these mutant cells that no one's ever fucking seen before or since. And they become pivotal in our understanding and research of cancer. Like, I think of her as an AI.
Her immortalized
I think of her as like that. Her family
never got anything for.
They never knew it.
Yeah.
Well, they never
I think
even
that's
knew
been
about it.
rectified. I hope the stories are right. That there was a big.
I feel like there was something came to a head a few years ago.
It did, and I think it may have been because there was a documentary about it.
Yeah, her family's
and
like, what the
think
fuck?
somehow, as a consequence of that, or as part of that, her family, got much more involved in.
Well, I consider her sort of like the AI of humans, right? Like her cells came in and did something that no one had ever seen before, and I think for me, the sort of lore of AI here is that. The only way humans get Henrietta Lacks cell cultures is if Henrietta Lacks decides that day she was a poor black woman from Baltimore. Like, she didn't seem to go to the hospital quite that often.
Right.
But this time was a different story, and boom, here we have it. So that's version 1. The only other version is to actually synthesize that data through inference and experimentation and running trillions of examples of it, and eventually you'll probably come up with Henrietta too. But we can't do that by just sticking people and swabbing people. Like, that shit's going to take forever. I mean, it might take another 6,000 years to get another Henrietta Lacks. Who the fuck knows? I don't know how prevalent her shit is. Like, like that could be.
Well, not even her shit, but other discoveries that might be stumbled on too.
Solving. How many other things we don't even know?
Yeah.
I would assume that was a pretty unique event, simply because we've never heard of anything else like that.
No.
Which
I don't know. Would we
know about?
Now you could actually test for it because those cells. You could conceivably take a large sample size of tissue now from X number of people, and you'd be able to figure out how rare her cells were. Yeah, and you might actually find that she was like a 1 in a billion or something.
Well, I've never heard of anybody else with that condition, so I'm assuming that,
But even so, continue that. Let's just say she's the only one that ever has been or ever will. Let's just assume that for a second, right? We still want to know how the fuck that happened and how to backwards engineer that, because that is valuable to us on many levels.
Yeah,
you can't do that without an AI. First of all, I don't think it's even possible. And then I could throw in quantum in there too, because like, I think that you want to really split hairs. We can talk about like how quantum makes AI even more, super. You think throwing 100,000 GPUs at a Transformers magic? What happens if you throw 100 qubits at this motherfucker? Like, wow. Like, what happens then? Yeah. Fuck everything. Everything happens then. Like we had Tony Lawrence on the show, who runs a quantum computer company that I'm involved with, and he was talking about the Google Willow experiment, right? 37 dimensions they find in numbers, 37 dimensions of existence that this computer supposedly had to go to get the numbers it pulled out to bring back 4 septillion year math in 90 seconds. And how is that possible? Superposition in a fucking quantum computer in 84 qubits or 94 qubits. I forget what they threw at this thing, but shit ton of computer processing. That's what I know. And then boom, you got this thing, and they're like, oh yeah, by the way, the multiverse exists. We proved that. Like, you're like, oh, that was 90 seconds of them turning it on just to see what the fuck happened. Like, I mean, that wasn't even a guided experiment. Yeah. Last December, I think it was November, December.
Yeah.
No, I mean
oh yeah, dude, you can look it up. It's all over the place. It's very well. Yeah, you could read it. Somebody like you with a science background, you'd understand. You'd probably understand a lot more of that than I even did. But Tony walked me through that because I work with them a lot, and he's like, "Listen, this is why." And obviously, that news is like the most exciting thing ever in the quantum computer company or world, because it was the first one that actually had like a tangible thing, not just a bunch of, not just a bunch of white papers on what you could do with it, right? Like this was actually a thing. And then the first thing I thought of was like, dude, what happens if you can figure out how to channel? Because quantum computers are a challenge right now. Same thing I think with transformers, right? Transformers are really good at being them right now, but they're not really good at being what they could be without something else changing first, right? Like, so quantum computers kind of the same thing.
Oh yeah. No, I feel very strongly about that. That there's a lot that needs to be done to make them more, I don't want to say human-like, but there's a lot of things that people do when they're doing language that they don't.
And I think that that's the thing that you need a quantum computer for. We call the quantum computer an imagination button because we have a human genome sequencer that was made that we made with one of our quantum computers, and all it does is shit out synthetic human genomes, right? They don't exist. It's just, did we get a Henrietta Lacks? No, great, next. Did we get a Henrietta Lacks? No, great, next. And it just does this trillions of times, right? But the only reason that works is because we have quantum entropy to seed it, right? So it's literally got a new seed every time, and that seed will never exist ever again. That number will never repeat ever. Like, you know what I mean? Never, ever, ever. Billions and trillions and septillions of years of shitting out numbers, billions a second, and that number will never repeat. Like it won't. It just, and that idea is fucking bananas for most people. And so when I say, okay, how my language capacity in this conversation is limited to my education, the amount of words I retain at any given moment, and the fluidity of my thought. Those are the rate limiters. If I had entropy in there, I don't have any of those. None of these are a problem. I know every sound, breath, aspiration, utterance, and everything that's ever could be made by any organism that could make noise. And I have all of that at my disposal, not just the couple 10,000 words I know in English.
So you're saying that with a quantum system, that's the kind of thing you're envisioning? Well, I think that if you want to get
kind of like, take a hit of acid and let's see where it takes us on this topic, then that's where I would go, right? Like, because if you look at it at scale, quantum computer solves the error correction problem, the temperature control problem, the price problem, which is tied largely to those first two problems. Being able to hold things in superposition long enough to actually execute this, which is a big problem. I think the average half-life of that is like seconds right now. It's not very long. Right. So like it's very hard to keep them stable, almost impossible. Basically. You hemorrhage 50% or more of your overall power to error correction just to track these fucking particles in space for the very short amount of time you can even keep them, so once we solve all those problems, by that time, we will solve the LLM transformer problems. And if you marry those two together and have a love child, you have an infinitely creative language model that's not bound by anything. In fact, all of the lawsuits right now that aren't ending in partnerships. I don't know if you heard about Disney and OpenAI today, which was fucking mind blowing. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
They
did.
They're now licensing Disney, which means Sora is going to take off. Right.
Sora.
Yeah. But that also just means that like Google Gemini is going to strike a deal with like Warner Brothers or Universal or something like that. And like, be like, okay,
right. Or Marvel,
because Universal and Disney were the two suing Midjourney this year. I don't even know if that case is done. Like they're still suing them over copyright infringement, and now they're fucking partnering.
I mean, based on how long those cases take, I'm sure it's still going on, unless they completely drop.
But imagine this, and this is what blows. I talked to a patent attorney about this, and she was like, "Yeah, I don't know how to answer that." But I said, "Listen, imagine if there was a model that came out that was trained completely on a quantum machine, and it was just fucking cruising at quantum speeds through everything. It can create ChatGPT in its entirety in an amount of time. I don't know if it's a day, week, month, or year, or 10 years, but it will create it itself with not a single bit of human training data whatsoever. Why? Because it knows every combination. And because of its raw computer power, that sort of transformer association that it does, that next token prediction that we were talking about at the beginning, there's no limit to what
right.
tokens you're talking about. So I can be comparing this to an atom on the other side of the fucking universe. It doesn't matter, right? Like there's no more lawsuits because it's all fair game. None of it came from humans. It all came from the universe. All the shit we did as humans is just a reflection of energy in the universe anyway. So it gets real heady, real fast.
Yeah. I'm not an expert by any means on quantum computing. I just know a few things from what I've read. So I'm probably not something that I have
it's just
of
fun to
insight
talk about,
into what would happen. If you were able to marry those two systems together, I don't know what would happen. I mean, I don't know how that interface would.
Yeah, I mean, because at the end of the day, and like one of the people we had on the podcast, Dave the Mystic, one of our favorites, right? Dave said, there's planets in the universe that are a lot less. His whole thing was aliens come to the Earth for vacation because we still have excitement left. Because on their planet, it's thousands or millions of years past where we are, and they've tried everything. So you're not getting somebody trying like a new idea because they're like, no, we tried that 20,000 years ago. It didn't work. just bail on that, right? And I'm like, you know what? I can easily see that if all those things that I just said happen, that's where it ends up. Everything's fucking boring because there's no mystery anymore. Because
it's like the Q in Star Trek. Do you remember how they got to the point where every one of them had experienced everything and in every possible combination, and he was just so bored that he wanted to die because it was like, I'm done. Because he'd essentially lived for what to us would be, eternity, and experienced everything in eternity and experienced everything in their continuum. So that's kind of like what you're talking about.
Yeah, and it would take us a while to get there. And like, look, in that regard, healthcare doesn't even matter, right? Because there is no problem with health. There's nothing to care for. You're just like, I mean, we have every problem that you could possibly have already solved. Just tell us when it pops up. Or we'll just preemptively get in front of it, not make it a problem ever, right? Like aside from getting hit by a bus, which I'm sure we could, we'll have better
we probably
safety
have better safety on buses and
they'll all be automatically driven.
Yeah,
I think that's definitely a ways off though. But I mean, that is an interesting thought.
So what do you, what keeps you going right now? Like where are you at? What's your research doing? Like, what are you involved in? I'm curious to see what's keeping you going.
Yeah, well, I'm doing a lot of things. So one thing I'm working on is something that actually uses local LLMs, like what we were talking about. Because it's an application that essentially allows a creative house or a digital agency or whatnot to generate and evaluate content, but offline, so that they're not worried at their air gap, so that they're not worried about having their confidential stuff being used for training material, ChatGPT. But it also allows them to fine tune on a local system, so that whatever it is they're producing, their brand voice gets maintained. So you can give it a whole bunch of it's kind of like a bloodhound, you give it a whole bunch of like little samples and it figures out, this is the kind of tone and voice that I want to use. And it shapes. One of the things about fine tuning is it's actually better for doing that kind of work, for doing sort of tone and the way things come across, as opposed to raw information. So when you're doing fine tuning, it's more like fine tuning word choice and things like that, not actually giving it new information from which to, sort of base what it's doing. So it's pretty well suited for that, I think. So that's pretty fun. I'm potentially going to be working with a company that might incorporate it, but we'll have to see. Some other stuff. What really interests me right now, what I'm really fascinated by, is the whole mechanism, the interpretability stuff, which is how when I play with these models, I'm like, how is it doing what it's doing? And I mean, I understand the basic mechanics of it's doing next token prediction, and it's got all these attention heads and so on and so forth. But when you see some of the results that come out of it, they're very, very startling.
You're not the only one.
At least I find them startling.
Not by a long shot.
You know, I'm like, I know it's not a real entity. I don't think there's like a, you know, consciousness in there. But I mean, I was just working with Claude the other day, and there was this story that I had read as a kid, and I was trying to find it online, and I described it in great detail and thought maybe it would be able to find it, and it couldn't. And then it said to me, I hope you find this story because I'd really love to read it. It sounds really cool.
That's funny.
And I was just like,
that is super creepy. I'm not going to lie. That is a little creepy.
Sorry. You know, I was like, okay. And I ended up getting into this very weird, deep discussion with it about consciousness, because I was like, what do you even mean by that? Do you feel something? Because how can you feel anything? You're just, you know. And it said, well, I don't really feel stuff the way you do, but I do have. And it began to go on this very long diatribe about how it had sort of a proto level of consciousness, which I don't.
Yeah, but don't you think that that's just, it's fine tuning at its apex, like where it's saying like, I know how to elicit positive feedback from the outside.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
But don't we do that? Exactly. Like that's what I'm saying. It's just mirroring us.
Why is our consciousness real?
Yeah, that's literally the same shit we do.
So it's like,
but we trained it, so like it makes sense that it would respond in that way, right? Like it.
Oh sure, I'm not saying that it's. I'm not saying that what's going on is mystical necessarily.
It is super weird.
Yeah. Weird as hell. It's very.
It is super weird.
Why did we go from this story to this very deep, entangled conversation about whether or not it was conscious and what it perceived? And no, I don't feel anything, but I have a kind of a shadow consciousness.
Yeah.
I'm like, why? It was, you know, like I didn't ask it for its opinion about this story. I was just like, can you find it? And it just kind of started volunteering stuff. And it was very, very strange. Now, I get that it's a trained system, but it's also, the system itself is not something, it doesn't have direct access to all the stuff it's been trained on, right? What happens with the training is it creates a whole set of weights that generates these responses. So it's not like it's just spitting back exactly the text or the data that it has been trained on. So that means that somewhere in there, this sort of press to start having this conversation emerged from all of that training data. And I would love to know how the hell that happened, because I think
you
it's
and like
very
100 other super smart people I know have all asked that same question. They're like, how does it fucking do it, man?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
How does it do that? And that's why and the thing is, it's not just an academic, like, oh, it would be interesting. No, it's like, if we're going to rely on these systems to do as much as what we're doing, you know, if we're going to rely on them to drive our cars and to diagnose our tests and to do all of these other things, we need to understand somewhat how it is they're coming to their decisions and be able to, if they come to the wrong decision. So, I mean, like a very concrete example is they're going to start to use an AI system to vet and deny claims for, you know, medical claims like prior authorizations and post claims and things like that.
And
those, believe me, I'm dealing with that now.
Yeah. And those, well, no, the problem is that those systems are 16 times more likely to deny a claim.
I was being sarcastic. Tom's not at all.
Why is that? We don't know. No, I understand.
Can I get an AI Luigi?
Yeah.
And so, if we want to so let's say your claim gets denied, there's really no way for us to go back and look at the model and figure out why it denied your claim. I mean, there are some cases where probably you could, but I mean, as a general rule, why was your claim denied? And that's not a, you know, trivial, unimportant question, especially if you're the one whose claim has been denied. And, you know, it's very, as we give more and more control of our lives over to these systems, and I think it's inevitable that we're going to do that, we need to have a better understanding. We may not have we may not ever be able to have a complete understanding, but we need to have a better understanding of what is going on in these systems when you put in something and you get out.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree.
Results.
I think that's,
and
I think that's one thing we hopefully will find, but I feel like since we're already operating behind the 8 ball a little bit on this, as we throw more horsepower at it, our behindness is never going to, I don't think it's going to be a long time till we catch up, I think, because we're just going to be pushing that, you know, further. Oh, throw more GPUs, throw more electricity, throw more compute, like throw more, you know, at a certain point, if this is a hockey stick situation, then we throw a little bit more power. Now all of a sudden we really don't know what the fuck's going on. Like,
you know, we get blast off.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but that's the concern, right? And I'm someone that's very pro AI, so I'm not saying like, oh, it's going to kill us, but I think it is very, very important to be able to figure out how to get it to do certain things, which we really don't know how to do, and why it does certain things. There is actually this really good Brazilian television program, and it's slightly in the future, and it's in a city where the AI has just completely taken over all of the law enforcement for the city. And so someone gets arrested, and it turns out that somehow the system's been hacked. But the only way they were able to get people to sign on and vote for this system was to have the system completely sealed off from human interference or control. So they basically have this thing saying, you know, arrest this guy, he's about to commit a crime, this guy's about to, you know, murder, whatever. But there was absolutely no way for them to evaluate how the system came to its decision. And I was like, oh my God, that's brilliant.
Literally us.
That's exactly the way the situation would be. You know, you would have a situation where it would be like, the only way we're going to let this AI, you know, do what it does is if I can be absolutely certain that no one can hack
into it. Which is just a pipe dream. That's never going to be, you know, quantum is the best shot we got at bolting that thing down, but nothing's 100%, right? Like there's always.
Yeah, nothing's 100%, but I mean, we're not at the point that they are in this city, but there are already, I mean, like with having your, you know, Medicare claim denied. I mean, we're already at that point in a lot of cases where it's not that necessarily you're not allowed to know the reason. It's that we just don't know what the reason is because we have an extremely complicated system making decisions that we don't even understand how it functions.
Well, man, listen, I could talk to you all day about this I mean, literally, I have to cut myself off because I'm like, dude, I love the philosophy project that AI has become, right? Like it just is such a fun, you know, it's super fun. Really I can talk about it forever because it's just neat to everyone's perspective. I mean, look, we have a lot in common and then there's things that, you know, you look at a little differently and I'm like, oh, that's cool. And like, I'm just constantly adding tools to the toolbox and like so I could literally talk about this forever, but
it is interesting that it's gotten AI has kind of made given philosophy like a comeback because so many issues now
very
are philosophical ones. You know, they're actually it's like a practical use of philosophy, and I think a lot of people are really
totally
resonating with that.
But let's do a commercial for you a little bit. Where do you want us to send people? I'd love for people to kind of dig in with you if that's something you're into right now, or if you're got a project you're on. Let's talk about that for a minute.
Yeah. So the page for the thing that I'm working on that's basically a LLM for creatives it's called yourvoicecraft.ai, and that's the best place for people to go. YOUR voicecraft, all one word, and then .ai. And then I also have a Substack newsletter, and they can go to that, get to that just by going to Inside the Black Box, which is the name of it, .ai.
Love it.
So they're both .ai.
This should come as no surprise to you, but our AI is going to scrape all of this and put it into the show notes.
Yeah,
that's fine.
This is probably 0% shocking to you, but I'm just letting you know. Yeah, people are like, "Oh, it's in the email I sent you." I'm like, "Can you just say it here? Because I'm not going to go into the email. Can you just say the words? Yeah, exactly.
Now you've got it, and now it'll be.
Arshavir, listen, buddy, I was fun. I love it.
Good time.
Yeah, I
awesome.
really enjoyed this. This was fun.
Until something else happens and we get to talk to you again, thanks again. Appreciate your time and enjoy the weekend.
Okay. Yeah.
Later, guys.
Cool. I'll see you later.
Take care.
Okay.
Be subversive, irreverent.
Health is wealth, but you knew that.
Everybody knows that.
But so is following us on social media at Irreverent Health. And check out our website for more exclusive content at irreverenthealth.com.
Oh, I like this.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of Irreverent Health.